Thanks for dropping by, as it were. All right, so how many of you guys, when you're done with making your piece, what do you do to get it ready before finish? Anyone? You sand it, right? That's what we're all taught to do, right? We sand it, we'll take, maybe start with 150 grit or 180 grit and work up to 240 grit or whatever, and some of us use machines that are noisy and they make my hands feel really strange. They make a lot of dust and it's a pain. And before about, in 1830 I think sandpaper was kind of patented or invented, and before then it wasn't around. There was a little bit of sandpaper in terms of like crushed up rocks that, added to, glued onto fiber or whatever. But it really was,
Rotten stone.
Rotten stone, yeah. Pumice, which has been, I think, is decomposed in some way. Various different products that give you, but in order to get, good, consistent finish on something, you couldn't afford that sort of labor-intensive product. You had to have something that didn't have ongoing expenses, and that gave you a finish. You all, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Europe, but there's pieces of wood in European buildings there that have been looking beautiful for hundreds of years, and they didn't have sandpaper to finish it with. So what they used to use was planes, good old planes, smoothing planes in particular, and card scrapers, usually a piece of steel made out of an old saw. Remember, before the mass production of steel was a very valuable product. So you would have your blade, but you'd make as a woodworker, you'd make your own plane bodies and so on. So this, commonly known as a coffin plane, that was the state of the art for smoothing planes, as they're called, until about the 1850s, where in Scotland you had this amazing kind of confluence of a massive steel building industry, a massive shipbuilding industry, and a lot of cabinet makers around there, both satisfying the shipbuilding industry and just making high quality furniture and cabinetry. And a few, I forget, I'm not sure who actually came up with the design, but this represents the absolute pinnacle of planes specifically for smoothing off wood in preparation for finish. And it's what's known as an infill plane. It's made out of 3 pieces of steel that are dovetailed together, believe it or not. If you look carefully at this afterwards, you'll see it's dovetailed there, with pins through it. It's made out of rosewood. It's filled with rosewood, and was just a really great plane. Now, I haven't got this tuned up perfectly by any means, because I haven't used it for a long time, but I thought I'd bring it as a piece of history. But these old guys, they really do a beautiful job. And as I say, I just took that down off the shelf this morning and played with it for a couple of minutes. So that was your state of the art. And then Leonard Bailey invented the plane with a frog, or the Bailey plane, and it's this fairly complex plane, great plane. The beauty of this is that this could do many things. This plane is really specifically set up to do one thing really well: smooth wood. But to do coarser wood and so on, to remove, stuff like work on something like this, you can adjust this plane so that you can do that work and then back it up and make some adjustments and go to really fine work. So I've got this guy set up until, just as a sideline, until fairly recently, I thought that the only way to get a high quality plane was to get an old Stanley, preferably one made before the Second World War, and if I'm lucky and restore that, I'll end up with a really nice high quality plane that does the job. If I'm lucky, right? Because most of them are going to get bought on the internet, and I don't know much, I can't tell much about something on the internet. But so there's that. Or I go to one of the big manufacturers that we've got now who make incredible planes like Lee Nielsen or Veritas and pay north of $200. And then a few months ago, Greg Weiss, who teaches the art and craft of plane making at San Diego at Palomar College, told me about our friends Jorgensen, who make these wonderful clamps that I'm sure many of you have in your shops, they recently started pretty much copying Lee Nielsen's copy of the standard planes, and they have come up. This is, apart from the fact that there's no bronze in it and it's got bright, ugly orange paint on it, this is pretty much a copy of the Lee Nielsen. I bought this in Lowe's in Santee for, have a guess.
25.
Huh?
25.
25. Well, you're a little low on that. $35. Right? And this guy I bought as well, $65. Right? Because something like a Lee Nielsen number 4, a Lee Nielsen number 4, of course, that one over there that just got raffled, I think is north of $400 to buy. So I recently did, because I've been exploring this idea of getting away from sandpaper and wanted to check out these planes, I recently built a chest of drawers that did actually win me a prize in the show, so it finishes pretty good. So what do we want to do? Why do we want to smooth the wood off? When we buy, we'll lead from the real, I'm missing a part. I'm going to pass this piece of wood around. I bought it at TH&H. It's been milled. It's nice and smooth. If I close my eyes, I can't feel any imperfections on there at all, or very, very few. But nothing that feels like ridges. But if I hold it up to the light, on both sides, I can see lots and lots of little ridges, and I'll pass that around. And the reason for that is the machinery that we use to smooth that off. It's a rotating drum that cuts that. And so what it does, I made a model of it. It cuts lots and lots of little curves like that, which is exactly what you can see there. So these are little ridges, and if we put finish on there, it shows these ridges up, and not only does it show them up, but because, I don't know if you can see, but if you look at this straight on, you can see in the middle where the face grain is, it's pretty light colored. It's pretty much the color of this basswood. But if you look at these edges, they're much darker color because the end grain, we're looking at face grain, and here on the sides, this is end grain, and it's absorbed much more of the oil, and you can see it's much darker. And so those ridges, if I put finish on, they're just going to get accentuated. So I really need a flat, smooth surface. That's why we sand, basically, in the modern world, because we've got joints and so on to clean those up. So what do we need to do in order to get away from using sandpaper and to finish our wood in such a way? I'm going to make a simulation here of, we'll call it a rough piece of wood. Essentially, once I get a piece of wood from TH&H, which feels nice and smooth but has all these little ridges, I got to get this flat, right? So the best thing for me to do is really just take off the entire top layer here, right? Just get down to one single smooth layer. And I can do that with sandpaper, go through 150, 180, 220, and then I've got a slightly fuzzy finish, and some people go through these like grain raising rituals and all this fun stuff to do that, and waiting overnight for the water to dry up and all of that stuff. But while I have an incredible patience when it comes to building a piece of furniture, when it comes to sanding, I've got no patience whatsoever. I hate it. I hate the noise. I hate the dust. It spreads through the house. I don't like it. So I've read about that you can get away from it. And there are times when you can. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say you can always do it, but on relatively flat surfaces, you can just dispense with sandpaper altogether. So I put pencil marks all over this. I'm going to, at present, this is set for a very fine cut. In fact, it's not cutting, it's just catching there. I'm going to set it for a slightly heavier cut so that I can first of all get all my top layer off.
What kind of plane is this one? What is the plane? What number?
Oh, this is a number 4. So this is probably the most common.
Like a jack plane?
It's not a jack plane, it's a smooth. Number 4 or a smooth. Yeah. And the term smoother is widely used just to imply a plane about this size. That's okay. But you turn, you know, this is a smoother. This is only designed for smoothing.
Did you flatten the bottom of that?
Sorry?
Did you flatten the bottom of that?
I did have to flatten the bottom of this a little. I had to spend about an hour tuning it up when I got it, but that beats the 6 or 7 hours you do tuning up your own Stanley. Or if you even buy any used plane, you're going to have to tune it up. So it did need a little bit of work, but once I did the work, I didn't have that illness, like, is my 80-year-old Stanley going to work, or is it just going to look beautiful? This thing, once I tuned it up, it works almost as well as a new one. I mean, performance-wise, it does just as well. It's like driving a Ford instead of a Rolls-Royce. You know, in terms of, you know, the lash on here, there's a couple of turns of lashes on, but it works incredibly well.
Did you flatten it the way you do a chisel?
Huh?
Flatten it the way you do a chisel with
Yeah, on sandpaper on a piece of granite, or diamond plate, or just sandpaper on a jointed bed or something like that, as long as you can glue sandpaper to a flat surface. So, first thing I want to do is just to remove the entire surface. So, notice there's nothing frenetic. Each action is fairly deliberate. Now there's some very slight ridges in between there. The actual surface, if anyone wants to step forward and feel it, that surface is already pretty nice. Otherwise it'll chip out. And now,
very shiny, like down low.
oh, you can see the polish. Yes, that's the other thing. This actually will, the planes will put a polish on the thing there before you even put anything. So now I've just gone to a very, very fine cut. I'm just getting very fine. But all I really want to do is remove those ridges. I still feel a couple of them. If I were at home, I'd just work away at this. I just want to point out that you don't have to have a smoother. You just a simple block plane will also do a really nice job of smoothing. So the block plane will do really nicely. Now I can still feel a couple of fine little ridges there. And they probably, I can't even see them, but I can feel them. Your fingers can see surfaces much better than your eyes can, but I can feel there's some roughness here. So
You hold it at a little angle to get a skew effect, correct?
you could do.
No,
You could.
I thought that's what you were kind of doing.
Oh, like that? Well, yes. If you look at video of anybody who planes a lot, almost nobody planes like this unless they're making a very deliberate cut. So I just plane at what's comfortable for my body. Plus, when I put it at an angle like that, less friction, so it's easier to work. Okay, so planes are great, and you can adjust them really nicely to make super fine cuts. And the nice thing about a smoothing plane is by adjusting the mouth down to a very, very small gap here, you can stop tear out from happening. So even if you get to go against the grain, the metal of the plane holds the wood down, and the blade is just sticking down a tiny, tiny bit, and it's just sharp, it just cuts it off rather than picking it up and flipping it over and tearing it out. So I hand-picked this as a really nice straight grain piece of cherry, but this is another piece of cherry that if you look at the side here, you can see the grain's coming up here, so I would want to be planing that way, this way, and then it comes up again here. So now I've got to turn my plane around and plane that way. And then when I get down here, it's just downright squirrely. It's just all over the place. There's little knots and all sorts of stuff in there. And so that's a normally set up plane is just going to tear that out if I start working at it. So I want to work it with a nicely set up smoothing plane, but then there's another weapon in the armor, the card scraper. So, how many of you went to Panama College? All right, so I can almost guarantee the way you were taught to use a card scraper, you had this little flimsy thing that wasn't very strong, and you were taught to set yourself up, thumbs like that, and to bend this back and push it this and work away at it, and you get a heat build up, and your thumbs start burning, and it's thoroughly on, and it hurts your thumbs, and it's any of you ever enjoyed doing it that way? Not a one of you, right? But these guys, this is, first of all, that was never the way to use a scraper. And you can buy the Barco ones for $11, $12. They're pretty good, but these ones I discovered recently made by Blue Fruit, and they're absolutely amazing. What a scraper does is it's a tiny little blade on the end of the scraper. And when I get to the point where my plane will not help me anymore, or I've got some, I've got some knots here, like I can feel it's not smooth there and it's not smooth there with a knot. But I can start working with the card scraper. The card scraper actually takes shavings off. So I'll do it forwards first. I usually pull it towards me because it's easier, but you can see I'm not exactly working hard. I'm not destroying my thumb. I'm getting savings. This is not soft. These are actual savings. And I've already removed almost all of it. But the way I usually do this is towards it. So if I'm working a piece of wood, I'll start at the far end. All right, so I've got about a minute left. So this is the other thing that I do. I find that, especially if I'm building something like a chest of drawers where I've got many pieces of wood, I don't know which pieces I've worked and which I don't. So once I've got my finish and I'm reasonably happy with it, and I want to know perhaps whether I've really got it, because once you put the finish on, that shows whether you really got all the little anomalies there. But I'll just put a couple of coats of shellac on that quickly, and while it's wet I can take a look, I can see if I've got any remaining wetness marks there, and I can do 2 or 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's rotate one more time. Listen, while you're moving, I have a couple announcements for you. Next month, the shop tour is going to be at the Craftsman Museum.